Basically, it was just a pause.
Yeah, that doesn't work very well. Yeah. And so after World War II, this area became what?
Well, now you've got Yugoslavia, and after World War II, Tito took power, and Tito basically sided with Stalin, and then after the war decided, Stalin wasn't quite oppressive enough, so then he developed Titoism, and it was a type of totalitarianism that really focused on the government, not nationalism. In fact, that was how things seemed calm for so long. Everybody was so afraid of Tito and being put in jail for doing anything, being overly religious, doing anything that had to do with putting the Bosniaks above the Serbs, above the Croats, that they would go to jail. It was a very policed state. And so when he dies in 1980, that's at the time when communism's failing, the economies for the communist countries over there in the tanks, and all of a sudden all the smart people start leaving the country, and all that's left are the thugs and the religious leaders, and there's a power vacuum, and they're all grasping for power. And not long after that, we start having ethnic cleansing, genocide. We start having displacement of people that were neighbors for years and friends for years, and now all of a sudden they're all fighting each other. And it was a very graphic, violent, bloody conflict.
Now, the Yugoslavia is now what? I mean, it's broken up into multiple areas. I don't even know if we call them countries, but what are those countries if we were going to be so brave?
You've got that whole area, and you've got Kosovo, which is down there. You still have Serbia. You've got the former republic, but basically it's Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is there. And the way they've set it up, they rotate the presidency through different ethnicities. It's still, NATO left, but Europe is still very much involved in keeping everything, I guess, keeping law and order in that area.
So there's a lot of different cultures and a lot of different religions, and you think religion has played some role in this?
And I think even someone that was anybody that would take an objective look at it, that's what you think. I'll give you an example, Phil. When I was there, so you had these different, where you had churches and mosques in the same town before the war, and everyone lived together. When the implementation force went in, they basically drew up what's called an IEBL, an inter-entity boundary line, and they basically separated all the ethnicities. The Bosniaks and the Croats fought together only because the Serbs were so much more powerful. It was convenient for them. So what happened is, there may be where the Serbs were in the control, they push out the Bosniaks or the Croats, and then they just go live in their house, and they would push them out, and then they'd have to have someplace else to live. The best example, I'd say, how much religion was helping in the area is, I'm in Bosnia. It's in February. Weather's horrible, cold, chilly, snow, and there's a family that's living in a house with one wall. There's a wall down. There's one out of the four walls still standing and no roof. And they've done the best they can to stretch plastic and everything else. There's a dump where people have just started dumping things right next to their house, and less than 500 meters, quarter mile away is this brand new church. And they tell me, I'm kind of asking about it, and they're like, well, yeah, there used to be a mosque there.
Yeah.
But it got torn down during the war, and now since that's in the Serb-controlled area, they've decided to build a church right on top of it. So the Catholic Church is over there rebuilding churches and making sure that they've got, that their source of power, their beacon of hope, if you will, is over there, while this family is just down the street trying to make do with one wall on their house in the freezing winter.
And so, of course, the church spends probably millions to build a fancy church, but not feeding the people they apparently claim to support.
Not feeding the folks, not rebuilding their homes, not even putting up shelters, not even building a church. Oh, let's say with a big pole barn out back that's got a way to where people can come and sleep and get warm. None of that.
Wow. So that's some of the fun and experiences you had in Bosnia and involvement for religion. And the other topic I want to talk about is your time as a life insurance agent. But before we get into that, I want to take a commercial break. So if you can hang on for me, we'll get some important messages and we'll be right back.
Here's an excerpt from Our Constitution, The Way It Was by Dr. Madeleine O'Hare.
Seemingly, no one knew just what to do. There was no clear-cut program. Some wanted to try to continue to negotiate with the British government. Others wanted to continue the armed revolt in the hopes of forcing the king and parliament to remedy their grievances. There was no one, apparently, who had the vision to call for complete severance of all political ties with Britain and to found a new nation. The situation remained stalemated until the end of the year. Then, in January 1775, Thomas Paine's pamphlet, Common Sense, came off the press. It was like a fresh wind clearing away a fog. In the simple yet forceful language that characterizes all his writings, Paine showed the absurdity of continuing a relationship of colonies to a mother country. Why, he asked, should the colonies, already peopled with 3 million inhabitants and destined to expand to cover a vast continent, be ruled from a small island 3,000 miles away? Why continue to be subjects of a tyrant king when the way was open to be citizens of a free republic? This pamphlet spread like wildfire. The small presses of the time could not keep up with the demand. Hundreds of thousands of copies were issued and penetrated to every colony in a short time. Paine's arguments were unanswerable. They left no middle ground. All talk of compromise and further petitions to Parliament died out. The debate was carried into the Continental Congress, and in a couple of months, a committee was appointed to draw up a formal statement. Thomas Jefferson was selected by the committee to make the draft. 6 months, almost to the day, after Paine's Common Sense appeared, Congress issued that famous document, which we call the Declaration of Independence. It has often been claimed that Paine actually composed and wrote the Declaration. This is debatable, and there seems to be no strong evidence to that effect, but that he was the man, more so than any other, who caused it to be written, no one can deny. All of the leaders of the Revolution gave him full credit for solidifying the sentiment for independence. Washington, converted by common sense, wrote asserting that Paine's words were, quote, sound doctrine and unanswerable reasoning. Jefferson, John Adams, Franklin, and Madison all wrote praising Paine's flaming arguments. In later years, Thomas Jefferson said of Paine, quote, no writer has exceeded Paine in ease and familiarity of style, perspicuity of expression, happiness of elucidation, and in simple and unassuming language, end quote. Franklin said, I value myself on the share I had in procuring for America the acquisition of so useful and valuable a citizen as Thomas Paine. John Adams wrote, history will ascribe the Revolution to Thomas Paine.
Our Constitution, The Way It Was by Dr. Madeleine O'Hare is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
All right, everybody, this is Phil Ferguson, and you are still listening to the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. With me is John Flanagan, and he was talking about some of his experiences in Bosnia. And before we get into the insurance thing, how did this experience with Bosnia affect your beliefs and your religion? Are you religious at this point in time?
No, my family was religious. I think, I went to a Baptist church as a kid. The bus came through the town one time, and you got to stick your hand and pull out a fistful of pennies if you went. So I went to church there, but there was a family Bible in the house, but it just was never something that we did. We didn't pray before meals, that sort of thing. And on my ID tags in the Army, there was Christian on the bottom, but it didn't really mean much to me. And I got to tell you, once being over there, and realized that, any God that would allow these sorts of things to be done in his name, including, I didn't even get into, and I don't know that the listeners would necessarily want to hear the atrocities that would happen over there. It's out there. But I could just say that the first time I went by a mass grave and saw a little pink shoe nearby, and knowing that there was somebody that little pink shoe belonged to in that grave as well, that was real hard for me to justify any sort of belief from that point forward.
Yeah, so I'll leave that with the listeners. Like you said, look up the breakup of Yugoslavia and the battles with Kosovo and Herzegovina and Bosnia and Croatia and Serbia. It's not pretty. And I don't know how much better it is today, but we'll move on. And so at some point you get out of the military, I'm assuming, and you end up working in insurance. And we're going to skip the name of the company because you might say something that's not flattery. But how did you get into insurance?
Well, when I first got out of the military, I did what we all do. I put on weight and grew facial hair. And from that point on, I had to find something to do. And I was at a point where I needed some flexibility in my job, so I looked at getting my life and health license, and then later my security license, and went to work for an insurance company, a well-known one of our big mutual insurance companies.
And your job was to what? Sell?
I was an agent, and so I could sell everything from life insurance to health plans, annuities, fixed and variable annuities, long-term care. All of those sorts of products.
And what are your thoughts about those things now? Are they good? Are they bad? You disagree with me? What's going on?
I don't disagree with you. I think I guess I would say this. One of the reasons I left the company was because it was very difficult for me to go the road to be a fiduciary. And I know you beat that drum the last few weeks. I know that as a dedicated listener, you've beaten that drum, and I think people are starting to understand the difference. And to do that, you had to be in a completely different category to be able to be a fiduciary and be able to offer those types of products. So even though I did a lot of retirement planning, and I'm not in any way ashamed of what I did because of the products that I would use and the way they worked with that company. They had some very good products, but you were still selling, and you still had commission choices to make. I'll give you an example. One of the products that I would do was a variable annuity, and it was a very good product. It tracked within 1% of the S&P, which, as you know, for a variable annuity, that's darn good, and most of them are nowhere near that. They had a bonus for when you signed up. It had a dollar cost averaging account that paid 10% APR as you moved your money in. It had a lot of neat things to it. And I have a lot of family friends still in it. And again, I sleep well at night because I did some research and looked at that product. And because it offered a bonus in the beginning, it was a neat product. Now, the reason they would sell this product, I'm certain, is it's almost like a lost leader, understanding that the majority of those products get annuitized later on where they really make the money. Does that make sense?
It does to me. Why don't you explain to the listener, what does it mean to be annuitized?
So basically what I would do is I would do rollovers. So you had your 401k or you had something of that sort, and then I would go in and talk with them. So I'll give you an example. The main product I would use would say, let's say someone had $200,000 in their 401k. So I would go in and say, well, we can take that if you still have some time, if you still are outside, if you still have a few years to grow your money, then this is a good product for you because it had a surrender charge, which means you have to pay back. You have to pay a certain percent of the money that you invested to the company if you pull out before the end of that period. For example, the one I did started at 8% and it lasted for 8 years, and it roughly went down 1% a year. So that didn't really matter to you as long as you were going to leave the money with the company for 8 years. And so what we would do is we would put it into this. You would be able to choose. You would be in the market, and you had to pay. In fact, the product that I sold gave you a 4% bonus right off. So as soon as you moved your money over, you had your $200,000 became $208,000, and and you could move your money in like a sixth of it every